I created this slideshow with a bit of, maybe a little bit of my hopes for how polished of a sermon I was going to give. And so I have to give a bit of a disclaimer that it's not going to be that, because because I am not prepared to do that this morning, and that's okay. My feeling from this time is that this is not really a time that's about doing things the most excellent that we imagine, but rather this is really a time about giving ourselves and receiving grace, and so I hope that you will extend that grace to me. And hold on, something's happened. And Matt, are you having trouble hearing me? Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. All right.
I'm just doing my form of live tweeting. Right.
Ah, great. Okay, cool.
Say that jump out at me.
Excellent. All right. Live tweeted by Matt. Thank you very much. So in any case, I do have a slideshow prepared. So what I would like is to just share some of the reflections that I have about my trip, and some pictures from the trip, and some things that I would like you to know, and about friends in Cuba. And it may be less organized than is your preference, or it may be, I don't know, hopefully it's not overly didactic. If you feel that I'm straying too far, I ask you to pray me back to the heart of God. Just say, Jesus, help her. And I've learned from friends that messages rise from the whole meeting, not from an individual person. So let's bear that in mind, and I just ask for your prayers. It may be that other things rise during open worship, and it also might be that there's things that are unspoken in the silence that are really expressing the richness of God's message. So thank you for your grace as I experiment a little bit with being less formal. I'm now going to share my screen. No, what's happened? Something happened here to my screen share. Solidarity as a form of Christian love. And I want to give another disclaimer at the beginning, just that I'm so overjoyed and honored to share about Cuba, because Cuba and Cuban friends have influenced me so hugely, and my experience there has changed who I am as a person, and I've spent a lot of time and energy studying the things that I've learned there. And I'm also nervous about talking about it. And one of the reasons that I'm nervous is because we are in a very politicized situation with Cuba. And it's really next to impossible to talk about Cuba without it taking on some dimension of politics. And so I just want to say that my intention in this is not at all to be political or to impose political my political thinking or Cuban political thinking or American political thinking onto Cuba. I really have no agenda as far as that, but I think that it's that conflict and the tensions and how we understand one another is so shaped by our political situation that it's just bound to come up. So it comes up right away just with even the term solidarity, which I think that number one, I think we don't hear that word a lot in the US, and when we do, it's kind of almost, I want to say, like a type of jargon. Like it's pretty much only used in very specific contexts regarding like international relations or regarding unions, that maybe it's like you might be thinking, why are you including that word in a message that's meant to be spiritual in nature? And the reason why is because I guess that word in Cuba and elsewhere in Latin America in Spanish is used much more frequently and in a much more wide variety of contexts, and it's so central to how Cubans understand and think about relating to other people that if I was to sum up my what I learned spiritually from Cuban friends, I think it would be with that word, solidarity. So that is the reason why I select that word. And I also chose this scripture from Ephesians, and I love Paul's letters. I love Paul's letters because I love the idea that we can see how Christians related to other communities in other areas, and their correspondence, and the way that, for example, Paul would bless somebody and say, I commend this person to your care because they're minister in our community and blah, 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 blah. That was the only way that another community had any way of knowing who that person was. And as a result, friends still practice that. And this is my travel minute, which y'all sent with me to Cuba, and this stayed in my bag where my passport was. And I had to because the letter was written in English and very few Cubans speak English, I had to write a translation out which I sent with it, and so that I could present it to clerks. And I came home with letters of greeting in English and in Spanish from friends in Cuba, as well as in Miami friends meeting, and also New England yearly meeting of friends who were also visiting during the time that I was there. So that's just one of the reasons why I selected this. The other reason I selected this passage and why this verse is powerful for me, I think it's very rich. It actually captures a whole lot of things. He's talking about the connection of people and the peace that can be created between people who are far and near, that can actually transcend our differences, that can and I especially want to highlight the language about having access in one spirit to the Father, that you're no longer strangers and aliens, but you're citizens and members of the household of God. the reason why those words ring out for me is because they really, I think, speak to sort of rights and responsibilities. And they evoke a sense of connectedness across difference, and they have a political tone to them. And a lot of the language that Paul chose to use actually did have that sort of political tone. You know, the references to the early Christian communities as ecclesia, that is the Greek word really that means like assembly of the people. It comes from their political and democratic process. And so these words kind of evoke an equality and a mutuality of process that I think really really speaks to the idea of solidarity. In fact, I don't know if he had a word for solidarity. But I noticed that this is a long passage that sort of gives a long explanation. But if I was going to sum it up in one word, that's kind of what I would say. That solidarity to me speaks to connectedness across distance, geography, different types of conditions. And so here's the dictionary definition from the Oxford. It's a noun in English. It's not only a noun in Spanish. But in English it's a noun, and it is that sense of unity that we have when we have a common interest or mutual support. And another thing that I love about the word solidarity is that it's almost impossible to imagine solidarity as an empty sentiment. It almost has to have action behind it. And I appreciate that, because part of my walk as a Christian has been looking for ways that we can love that are really resilient and really really robust and can really respond to different conditions and are not sentimental and not sort of impotent in the face of really complex situations. So that is the other reason why I choose that word.